This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello everyone and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the Red Dwarf podcast here on the We Made This podcast network. My name is Kurt North and I am here with you fine smegheads today to talk about Red Dwarf 10. Joining me for this excellent adventure is Mr. Matt Latham. Because Matt Latham, you have seen 10 more than Mr. Mark Adams.
It has, yes, I have. Hello, by the way. Hello, people. Hello.
How the devil are you?
I'm very, very good. Thank you very much. I am stupidly excited. I've been waiting for this for so long. Even more than Blue.
Even more than Blue. Excellent. And also with us is my co-host, Mr. Mark Adams.
Evening.
How are we doing?
I'm very excited to talk about what is, to me at least, new Red Dwarf. We had a nice little Zoom get-together where we all watched all of Series X in one sitting, and we had a chat, and we just, mates watching telly. It was good. But now we're trying to do proper episodes. It feels
weird?
like a landmark in a lot of ways, don't you think? Or almost like a new phase.
It definitely feels like a new phase. As I say, the fact that me and Matt and Carl have all watched this properly, and we had a great time on that Zoom call. That Zoom call is available for a price.
What are we going to do with that Zoom call? We did record it. I don't think it's particularly interesting.
No, it's not. It's fine. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching your reactions, and I enjoyed waiting for certain moments, and I'm sure we'll get into certain moments, especially with this episode as well. But it was good to do that, and I think it was an interesting experience, and as you say, it's a new world. You haven't seen 11 or 12 yet either, so I'll Promised Land.
No, because we decided that we were going to do the same again, get together and watch Series 11 together. And at that point, you banned me again from watching more Red Dwarf U shit back.
Excellent. Okay, so shall we just dive straight into this and see what we think? Do we think we should do that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, well, let's go and do that now. We are here to talk about Red Dwarf Trojan. Let's start from the beginning, as we should. This is something I alluded to, I think, in a couple of episodes. Just how good does Red Dwarf look?
Oh, yeah.
In this quality and the actual angle that we get to see Red Dwarf for the first time proper as a series on Dave.
We've already done episodes on the theme tunes with me and Colin, watching and predicting and getting things terribly wrong and saying the word lemons a lot. But I didn't know that the very next scene would utilize the original Series 1 and 2 theme from Red Dwarf as well. And that just sent shivers up my spine. There was obviously the 3 to 8 theme. I knew that was coming, but just immediately going, it just felt right. It felt like, there was an element of trepidation. It's a new TV station, paying for it. Do they want to fuck with it? Do they want to change it? Do they want to put their own brand on it? And whilst I didn't hate Back to Earth as much as anyone else, it still isn't great Red Dwarf. It's just acceptable Red Dwarf. And it just settled me into a nice, comfy Red Dwarf that I was ready to consume. So that was a great start.
Not a unrelevant, if that's a word, tangent. I mean, you come into this for the first time, Mark. So the first time you watched it was with us. Did you have any preconceived notions of what to expect? Because there's there's a lot of stuff online about the Dave series are not as good as the original BBC series. It's definitely not as good. There are some people who stop watching because of Back to Earth, like yourselves, like Colin. I mean, Colin is very much like would take out copies of Back to Earth and burn it. That's how much he dislikes it.
I don't hate it that much, but Colin is not fond.
I mean, yeah, and I'll be interested to get his reaction to the same question. Did you have any preconceived notions of whether it's going to be better, good, bad? Was you swayed by online opinion? Or?
Not really. I'd obviously heard that it was inferior to the BBC series, but I've recently watched Series 8 and that was fucking shite. So, I went into it with an open mind. I was expecting it to be kind of just okay/good Red Dwarf. And the only things I knew going into watching these 3 series and the film is that the film is about the cat people. And at some point in some series, they all look like Crichton. There was nothing else that I knew about these series. I knew they were on Dave. They had a reduced budget. And so I think I went into it with an open mind, expecting it to be fun, but slightly watered down Red Dwarf. And I don't think it is. I think it's remarkable on how little budget, with an aging cast and 50% of the writing team gone, and a channel in the middle of fuck nowhere on random British telly, that they've come out with a series that is not only not an insult to old Red Dwarf, but so much fun.
I think particularly rewatching 10 with you guys and later, I think 10's actually up there with one of my favourite series. It's not a patch on 2 and 5, definitely not. Probably not as good as 6, but I reckon it's probably at least high to middle in the ranking, because there is some really good stuff on this. And as we talk about Trojan, I think Trojan has become what is in my top 5 episodes of the whole show.
Do you like it more than you enjoy Blue?
No.
I know that was a mean question.
Look, and it's something I wasn't going to get into this early, but I think Blue I really like, but I think Blue focuses heavily on a certain set piece, and I think that's that kind of overshadows the rest of the episode. Now there are parts in Trojan which are I think are up there with changing. There's a certain moment me and Kurt have been talking about for absolutely ages behind your backs, because we couldn't spoil it here, which I think is up there with the changing the light bulb and the boxer shorts and that kind of stuff. But when I was rewatching this, I was like, hang on, this episode's actually, there's a lot more to this episode than that, and there's a lot more to it, and that's actually quite funny. And the way it's structured, I think, it's very different to how I think Red Dwarf episodes have been structured in the past in terms of comedy. So it's kind of new, but somehow manages to keep a well pace. And I was pleasantly surprised watching this. I remember when I first watched it, when it first aired, I was very much, I'm not sure about you, Kurt, but I was very kind of okay, Back to Earth was a bit iffy, and then by the end of it, I'm like, holy crap, this is brilliant.
Have you reassessed your opinion of Back to Earth though as better than you remember it being? And I think because Back to Earth was better than I remembered it being when we rewatched it for the podcast, I think I went in quite optimistically. And it was very different to you watching this not long after Back to Earth, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we've been building it up, but not we've not been saying, oh, it's the best thing since sliced bread. We've saying we're really excited to see what you think about it. It's going to be interesting to see what you think. And I know you could probably tell that we all enjoy it. I would agree. I don't think, and this is not me trying to colour 11 or 12, I think 11 or 12 are really, really good. I don't think they're as good as 10. Right, I think there's moments that's really good in 11 and 12, but there's issues.
There's nothing cack. There's no real cack episodes in 10. I think it's a very high quality series. 11 and 12, there are ones that will give Pete Part 2 a run for its money in terms of the weakest episode of the show.
Really?
Yeah.
But there is other gags which are fantastic. I've seen stuff on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it nowadays.
Twitter.
where they've actually memed Red Dwarf on the most recent Doctor Who episode, which was really interesting. And the episode I'm talking about is the Wild Blue Yonder. And they've memed, like, out of context Red Dwarf quotes with some of the new stuff. And it is quite funny, but you won't get it, Mark. So you've got to wait until you get to a particular scene, which I'm referring to there. But yeah, I do think that. And I think Red Dwarf 10, whenever I think about rewatching, Red Dwarf is my go-to-bed TV show. I tend to, like, literally, if I'm going to stick a Red Dwarf on for 30 minutes, it's normally that or Alan Partridge, one of the Alan Partridges. I tend to watch as like a, just a nice chill out. And more often than not, I'm picking, if I'm not picking the original series, it's Red Dwarf 10. I tend to pick Red Dwarf 10. It's, yeah, it just feels, I think it's because it is recent as well. I think it feels that way. And by recent, I mean the 4th of October 2012.
Yeah.
Just so we know.
So 13 years ago.
13, 14 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. So that's by recent. I mean, but recent for Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
Is what
talking about recent, we will probably see new Red Dwarf in 2024. We will probably see Titan. We don't know how many episodes it is. We don't know how and where and when or anything like that. But it seems to me it's further along than we thought it would be when they announced it quite quietly, almost like a soft announcement. And then suddenly they dropped huge amounts of information just a week later. And we did poll whether or not people would like us to carry on going along with Series X, Series 11, Series 12, Promised Land, and then Titan. But our listeners said they wanted us to do Titan straight away. So that's what we're going to do.
And to be fair, all the hosts said that as well.
Yeah, but it's a bit of a tangent, isn't it? That
yeah.
It doesn't mean it will interrupt the plan that we have for Series 11 and 12 of it being New Red Dwarf for Colin and me. Because we won't need to have seen 11 and 12 for a prequel.
So let's talk about this episode then. Mark, general thoughts on this episode in particular?
You lot absolutely rinsed the moose gag. I'm well aware that you all love it, the pair of you, and Carl. But the moose gag is really good, isn't it? And it's funny. It looks good. It's Red Dwarf how it should be. I don't care that they haven't explained why he's a hologram. I don't care that they're not in prison anymore. I don't care that Kachansky's not there, although I would have liked to there. But it's quintessential, in inverted commas, classic Red Dwarf. So 4 to 6 style Red Dwarf. And I am here for it. And it was a very funny episode of classic, in inverted commas, Red Dwarf. It's just a joy that this exists, and it was new for me 14 years later.
Matt, what about yourself? Overall thoughts on this episode?
As I said, this is up there with my favourites. Like after a few rewatches, and particularly last night, removing myself of the moose gag, and I'm looking forward to dissecting why that works. There's so much more happening on a below surface level on this episode, that particularly in terms, and this can work for a lot of series 10 in terms of continuity of the whole show. There's the trying new things, there's an American sitcom influence in some of the plotting of this as well, which is interesting, but they managed to pull it off. Yeah, there's just so much exciting about this episode that I really, really quite like, and it's just like, and I just seem to find new things about it every time I watch it.
I would agree with that, and I think that there's some callbacks that we will get to, and this is the kind of the beginning of this. So I've always mentioned about callbacks, and there's a particular one which we will get to in the death scene where there's a definite callback, and we'll talk about that. But even like sort of, as I say, continuity, the Howard stuff, this, the moose gag, everything seems really well and tightly knit together, and that's what I particularly like about it. before we do, I mean, this is going to be a particularly long episode because I think we're just getting into the beginning of Red Dwarf 10.
Yeah.
I've got behind me on my screen, just for everyone on the audio forum, I tend to have the Red Dwarf 10 set on my backdrop when I'm talking. What do you make, Mark, to the set itself? I mean, you can see a little bit of it behind me here. So what do you make to the new Red Dwarf set?
It feels like the right choice for a more modern look at it. Whereas, the 80s and 90s stuff looked modern for 80s and 90s. That's so long ago. Whereas this feels more modern with the kind of like couch being a focus point. And I know this was done massively cheaply compared to the original series, but it looks much more high tech. It looks like a spaceship. It looks like, I wouldn't go as far as steampunky or cyberpunky, but it looks like a modern spaceship, and it feels like a natural evolution. I like it.
Yeah, same. And at the time of recording, I'm finally going through this magazine episodes, and I've just finished, I think, the first episode, issue 7, which was the first batch you did in 2021. And first of all, I'd forgotten about the Patreon ad that Tan used to do.
Made no fucking money, so that's why we stopped it, innit?
Yeah. And all the references to cerebral jukeboxing back in the right in the childhood and all that. But one on the 7th episode, the last episode that I listened to, about a few hours ago on the way home, there's actually something in this magazine about that, and you, Carl, and Colin talked about the fact that series 5 had less of a budget than series 1. And it was but then I think it was, I can't remember the name of the set designer that he was talking about. It was pretty much economically knowing what to do and just being better at budgeting that makes it look better on a cheaper budget than the first series. And I think something similar happened here. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the budget was in comparison to the previous series, but it can't be it's got to be either the same or even less at some points. But yeah, it looks really, really good. It looks like there's more money on it when it probably actually isn't.
That Dave won't have the same budget as the Beeb. They just won't. I have made an assumption. I haven't checked my facts, but surely it's got to have less budget than the Beeb had.
Yeah, but I think the set, particularly the bunk set looks really great. I think the fact that it's now red, it feels like it's more red than grey. Goes onto it. I was, as much as I quite liked the bunks they had in 3 to 5, it seemed too sterile. I quite like this. Feels like the engineering bunk. This is the lower decks crew. I think, even though I think technically it's supposed to be officers' quarters or something, because I think apparently if you read into it, apparently they've actually physically moved, which is the in-universe way of saying what it's changed. But yeah, I really, it looks more like they've been they're just shoved in the engineering decks rather than in the plush penthouses of the officers. So it looks like they just roll out of bed and go to work fixing the vending machines on the maintenance decks. And I just like how that feels.
What about the first scene that we get? As I say, we see the beautiful Red Dwarf, like I said at the very beginning there, but then we move into the kind of the control room where Lister is watching pig racing.
Have you actually watched pig racing?
No.
There's a YouTube channel. It's an ethical thing. It's the way they get the pigs to get their exercise before they eat lots of food. It's not evil or anything. And it's fucking great. I'll send you the link and put the link on the socials. Pig racing is great. I've watched all of the... Right, my friend showed it me only a couple of months ago, and there's 8 seasons of pig racing. I've watched them all. I just sit there and watch fucking pig racing. It's great.
When you lose, do you go, "Oh, you fat pig"?
I have got a favourite pig, but she's the worst one. She's rubbish, and I love her. Whenever she becomes anything other than lass, I'm like, yeah.
To be fair, I can't mock. I watch marble racing, so.
What's marble racing? Surely there's no right.
So I think it's Jello's marble runs where they kind of do races. So they've got running, they'll have just a bunch of marbles, and there's a guy called Greg Woods who does the most earnest and earnest kind of goodwill commentary ever. Just like, and so-and-so's taking over, blah, 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 blah. And then there's this thing called Marbula One, where they have, like, it's Formula One, but with marbles on, like, designated tracks and stuff, and it's
that
great.
Sounds even more ludicrous than pig racing.
Oh, it's so addictive. But anyway.
Honest, right, should we do a special on pig racing?
It's there. It's in, isn't it? 8 seasons. There's 8 seasons. How many episodes per season?
It depends on the season. It gets more as they go along.
That's had more screen time than some stuff that we've covered.
It does, yeah. It had a bit of screen time. But what I like about the actual beginning of that is that, like you say, you get the da, and you have these sweeping shots, which 10 uses quite a lot. They use a lot of sweeping shots right through the whole of the show. And I like it particularly because you've got a bit of energy with listed, like going, come on, doing that. It gives you just that instant, like a little push up to go, all right, okay, we're getting a bit excited now. This is new Red Dwarf. And I like that's how they lean into the beginning of the episode.
Yet it's about pig racing. So it's quintessentially ridiculous and Red Dwarfy, like, armpit name that tune or whatever. It's just so silly. Yeah, I'd have a game of armpit name that tune. And I have watched pig racing, so it's not quite as silly as perhaps to me as it is to perhaps some other people. That's what we do next Christmas, innit? Mm-hmm. Armpit name that tune, as long as Hobbs not fucking hosting it.
Oh, we could just have a game of pig racing where we've got to place our bets and see who wins.
I've watched it all. Well, maybe I'll save the next season of pig racing, and
And we can have a game of pig racing betting.
This is what happens when Red Dwarf doesn't do the normal thing and have normal Christmas episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, and then Moose show up.
And then Stupid But True shows up, which is a book that was in Peterson's quarters.
I did like the Peterson reference. It made me smile. They obviously care about Red Dwarf. We're never going to see Peterson because he's fucking Harry Potter actor these days. But it was lovely to get a reference about Peterson. That made me smile.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where I think, because I think I know what Matt's kind of alluding to here, this now formulates like an 8-9 minute sketch in a 25-minute episode, which is interspersed with gaps. And you can watch this. You can watch this on YouTube with just the "It's a Moose," and it's about 9 minutes long. And I think really we should really like talk about this as a whole because it is the main joke in this particular scene. So Matt, the setup here obviously is to give Kat the information before we get to the punchline, and saying Peterson's quarters. This first scene, what do you make to it in the way it's kind of like sort of playing out and the interplay between Kat and Lister here?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is just like a random conversation that they have, which if you don't feel is going to come back at any point. But they are kind of seeding stuff in, but reminding you just how the logic of the cat works. So like, and how he kind of sees the world, how he takes information and how he learns stuff. So it's not just about him being dumb. It's about how he takes logic and learns things and applies cat logic to things. So when it eventually pays off, he feels like he's learned something and feels like he's gained intelligence. But because it's how the cat does it, it's humorous because it's how he sees what he's talking about being right, and it just works. But I think the groundwork being laid here, like the subplot for the first half of the episode, I think it just again feels like throwaway, kind of just like, oh, they're just filling the time by just having some kind of almost series 7, series 8-ish jokes where it's just like, oh, they're not looking right, they're not doing this and this. Now in previous seasons they would that's just kind of throwaway kind of gags, which feels like it's filling out, which I think particularly in series 7 and series 8. But it is setting up that kind of payoff later on, and I just think and it's entertaining to watch.
And then honestly, it's nice to see a focus on the cat.
Again, just like jumping ahead, what this eventually does as well, and what I think is one of the good reasons about this, is that this eventually, even though it doesn't show up at all again in the second half of the episode as a joke, it does build it does converge and influence the A plot of Rimmer's character arc for this episode. So it's a key turning point for Rimmer, and sets up the basic the apple beach ball of death gag with the eyes. So it is building to set up that visual gag as well. So it feels like there's a lot more work and care being given to set up these kind of jokes, but then making them tie into the actual story. So you can't argue that it's a throwaway gag because everything's deliberately setting up and paying off. So you can't just like look away, miss a line, and then come back and you kind of have to keep your focus on things. And it's a lot tighter than I think than you sometimes used to in Red Dwarf. So it's quite interesting how they've done this.
What about this opening scene then, Mark, with the joke? But before then, Kat's clothing.
Oh, chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. And that's always the fear of new stuff, isn't it? That they just won't quite get it right, and it'll feel incongruous. It'll feel kind of uncanny, like and it doesn't, because the cat looks fucking fabulous. And this scene, I did notice that it was canned laughter, and that is a difference to some of the Red Dwarf that we know and love, in as much as there's clearly no live studio audience. The laughter is canned, but at least there's some laughter because it does feel uncanny when you watch Series 7.
I think there is an audience. There's an audience. It's an all audience.
Is it?
Yeah, because they are.
There's a really, really important part at the end of the gag, where they start applauding, and Kat has to hold, Danny John-Jules has to hold his conversation to do it, which is why I think it's amazing.
Yeah,
well, this is me watching new shit. I missed that. It came across as canned, so I'm guessing it's been quite severely edited, and there was a lot of more backgroundy stuff going on with the audience then, maybe, because it does feel quite abrupt sometimes.
Possibly, but there's definitely
maybe faded out and stuff potentially. But
there's definitely parts when we get to that point, you'll definitely see like Danny John-Jules and Chris Barry are kind of trying not to break.
They're trying not to break. I mean, we can talk about that now because it's obviously a slightly different to the actual full gag. But when he does go, "It's a moose," and then they start howling with laughter, and then this rapturous applause starts to build. And then Danny John-Jules is just holding there. He's just kind of like going, "Are they going to stop? Are they going to stop? Are they going to stop? It's a moose!" And he has to then repeat the line and then continue on and then have another gag at the end of it before he runs off. So the fact that they've got that ripple of applause, and that is the thing that I always like think about whenever watching this episode, because it's always like the way that Danny John-Jules just has to sit there and go, and it always reminds me of Rimmer
was he Swedish? And then Chris Barry's there going, and somehow in the position he's in, he's in the right position actually, Rimmer, to like close his eyes and just go, "Oh God damn it!" And but it's there for a lot longer than you would actually have that.
Yeah. So when you rewatch it after tonight, Mark, watch that moment again, because you'll see it, and it's incredible. It's really, really funny.
But this is fascinating, isn't it? Because there's no way I'd have made that mistake with series. Well, it's certainly series 1 to 6, maybe series 7 and 8. But there's no way I'd have made that mistake. But it did. I don't quite know why, but it came across as canned to me. So I think I need to rewatch that. Shucks. What a shame. I
actually applied to be in the audience. This is the first time I applied to be in the audience for these Red Dwarfs, because they started to like put them online and saying apply for them. I never got there, never got in the lottery for it, but this is the first time that I actually applied to be on a show. Cool. And it didn't work.
But and sorry, going back onto that as well, I think I quite like the idea with the progression of the moose gag. So if we just continue, if you just get the moose out of our system.
We need to get the moose out of the system.
But so we ended up.
Of course, we're not. They're mooses.
Well, I think it's quite interesting, like how, because it builds up with like the different characters and the way. So because immediately when Rimmer starts looking lateral thinking puzzle, and then Lister does the, oh, someone's got to be very clever to get that, and it's like,
yeah, just like playing up against Rimmer, like kind of going, right, I'm going to show him up. He thinks that I'm just, I have no intelligence, and he hasn't failed his exams for so long, because even that's in this episode, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think,
but it's structured in a way as well, particularly because the main cause of it is when we talk about the A plot of the episode, is to build up like Rimmer's resentment and pretty much anger at the world. So for context, because he's trying to relearn his astronavigation things and continuity, deep dive continuity, he's still trying to be an officer. So it's still that. Interestingly as well, I think if on this episode, and I think pretty much every episode of this series, actually, they very much deliberately try to point out that Rimmer is technically the ranking officer on board, which I don't, which I don't think they hardly ever do, until at least series 1. But anyway, yeah. So he's doing this officer stuff, and it's building up to that. But he does it in a way that, like, oh, he can write if Lister gets it, Rimmer would automatically find out. Hang on, you've read the book before. So that would really down. But then because then when Lister goes, then Crichton comes in.
And we've got to talk about Crichton, the way that he actually picks up the book, and because he's already read it. Because he kind of goes, "Have you seen this thing about mooses?"
Yeah.
That line is as you say, with that build up, the thing with that lateral thinking question is, one, it's actually if you've been a lot of people will have been in that situation where you have lateral thinking tests and to jump in and do all that kind of thing, but to have, like, as you say, the Lister element, then right, okay, Crichton's coming in, okay, I'll get him on this because I now know the answer and I can make myself look intelligent. And the way that Crichton delivers that line, just like, oh, it's a moose.
It's a tree.
It's just like, okay. And then, obviously, as you say, when it gets to the cat, and the cat goes, "Lottery, what?" And it's like, here we go. Yeah. I can get this again. Love the way that the cat moves as well. Because obviously, it spins round. I've just smacked my microphone. Spins round and really picks that up. And then, as you say, the build up and the build up and the build up comes. Going to that punchline, as you say, was he Swedish? Rather than, because you're thinking, what's he going to say? And in fact, it's just like, a man, was he Swedish? And it's just like, oh, and you can see Rimmer just go, oh no, and then when he delivers the line, and then because of the very beginning of the episode where they send antlers out the roof, sun shining, and no, they were in the road, moosing about, all that kind of thing. Because he's, as you say, because he's learned that, he goes, oh, and by the way, the mooses are in the road, not in the car. just brilliant, because you think the joke's over, and he just finishes with that touch and then just dives on out there. It's incredible.
And he builds up on all the conversation happening at the start. Rimmer's always been a character where he thinks he's got a very low self-esteem and low opinion of himself, but he's still a part of him still puts himself above the other crew members. So he sees himself as above Lister, he sees himself as above Lister in terms of rank. He sees himself above Crichton because he always sees Crichton as an accessory. He just honestly has no concept that the cat has any intelligence. So what happens is that in that order, he's gradually being undercut and undermining his own opinion of stuff, and which builds up to the whole resentment stuff and the whole resentment and crashing, which closes Act 1 of the episode, which coincidentally was actually the ad break on Dave.
Okay.
So Dave had ad breaks.
I hadn't really thought about that. There would be ad breaks, wouldn't there?
Yeah. So there was one ad break, and it was when it was the beach ball of death, the Apple Mac spoof with his eyes and stuff. But and
was it supposed to be like a cliffhanger? I don't. It's not very cliffhangy. I don't think it needs to be though for a comedy thing.
Well, what's interesting with that is that I keep forgetting, especially now it's on iPlayer, that on my Sky I just say Red Dwarf and away it goes. And then I select it. And then if I'm watching Trojan and it does it and it comes onto the X, it actually puts the X on screen and it comes straight back again. So it's like it's where the original ad break was. They keep that in with no adverts and it goes straight back in. And every time I do that, I go, oh, fuck, I'm not an iPlayer. And I literally have to go out. I don't know why I do it, but I go out of UK TV and go into iPlayer and watch it on the iPlayer. Because I think it's the continuity thing that you don't need. You can watch it all in one go rather than having that stupid X come up and just go ba-dunk like that, which is intriguing. Have we moosed out? Is there anything else on the moose that anyone wants to mention?
I think we've fully covered moosery.
I do want to say that I do think that as a mission statement saying this is what we want to do, we need to have something big, or like a comedic set piece. I think it works really well, and I genuinely think this deserves to be up there with the best moments of Red Dwarf. I absolutely cackled and pissed myself the first time I watched this. I was in pain because of laughter.
I think anything that involves Rimmer getting utterly humiliated in a clever sitcom-y way is always going to be perfect Red Dwarf. But this is so good. Like, so good. And you're right, we howled with laughter when this first turned up, and it's relentless. It's absolutely relentless, and it's blow after blow after blow onto Rimmer's ego, and that's just fun. I think they've actually done a really, really good job of, whilst still being a figure of fun and still being a fundamentally unlikable human being, they've managed to make him more sympathetic with less mean humor here. It seems much more modern, and we're not going to see very much ick going forward. At least that's how I felt. But of course, next episode, lots of ick. But we'll move on. We'll cover that next week.
Hey ho, Pip and Dandy. Hey ho, Pip and Dandy. Have you read any good books lately, Matt?
Not many. Have you got any recommendations?
I've got a recommendation. Sometimes you have to lose before you're ready to win. It's not a long book. And I think Crichton and Rimmer works really well there because, as I say, it's just the interplay and wordplay, which I quite like. I like the fact that they actually just did play around with that, and I think it's really effective. But do you expect to fail? Because this, again, going back to the Rimmer thing, that he expects to fail because of, the fact that he's running these Astro Navs again, and this kind of kicks into the actual resentment file. And what Colin thought was lemons when he was when he was smacking the yellow paper, which was quite funny on the trailer, on the advert there. It's not a lemon. It's a piece of paper with a fail on it. So how do you think that this scene overall worked then?
It's easy to empathize with him in this because lots of us have tried something that we really want and not got there. And lots of us have had to find ways to deal with failure. And lots of us have tried to be a better person and not managed it. And then face. Oh, Chris Barry's face. So much face. Good face. I enjoyed the face.
Matt, what do you think too, again, going back to the moose joke, the hey ho Pip and Dandy does make an appearance at the end as well. So there's another one that pays off later on. One
of the more niche types of videos that I quite like on the internet, not those kind, are kind of rap rhyme scheme analysis, where they'll have like famous rap verses on, but then they'll color code certain sounds that rhyme. So it'll show you how kind of different rap artists and different styles all kind of intertwine and stuff. So like you'll have Andre 3000 from Aquemini by Outkast, where pretty much for about 30 seconds every single line is the same sound and syllable, and you just have one colour look through. You'll have, I think, Stay Wide Awake by Eminem, which has about 6 columns of the same colour in like one of the most densely rhymed stuff. But it will constantly keep using these colour schemes to refer to stuff. And I feel that if you had the script for this and colour coded certain ongoing jokes or subplots, you'd have something very similar in that you'd hardly have any white space, because every line or every kind of throwaway line is referring or paying off different things. So even the hey ho Pip and Dandy, which would be like, again, a throwaway line in perhaps an earlier series, comes back in again at the end.
And I thought watching pig racing was a bit obscure.
Some people see colour. Some people hear colour, even. My words are all over the place. Some people can't speak. Okay. Hey ho, Pip and Dandy. Is it a phrase you'll come back to, Mark? Will you ever say, hey ho, Pip and Dandy? Will it become a quotable dwarf?
I think the problem with quotable dwarf is that I'll never be a teenager obsessively watching VHS videos with this. Sure, I'm going to watch it a few more times, but it's never going to be the consistent, repeated, shared experience with my brother that it was when I was watching the original Red Dwarf. Is it fun? Is it cool? Might I use it? Yeah. But obviously there's not going to be any more quotable dwarf. This is clearly quotable, but not quotable dwarf in the context of what we used to do. Like I say, new phase in it. New phase.
I'd still say it's a moose.
Yeah.
Next, again, going back to Matt's point about like things being interspersed in the episode, and it's dense. It is dense. I'm just clicking through stuff at the moment, and I'm 4 minutes in, and we get introduced to another moment: the all-droid mail order shopping station, the QVC of space.
My notes just read, fucking shopping channel, fucking hold music. Everybody knows about the fucking shopping channel. Everyone's been duped once, and everybody has had to deal with hold music. And yeah, it's again it's a good way to engage with an audience. Even though it's a science fiction sitcom, it's a concept that is very, very easy. Almost if this is a soft reboot and people haven't watched Red Dwarf before, I doubt there's much of that. But still, it feels like they've gone for concepts that are easy to understand. Trying and failing, fucking shopping channels. It works really well. It's something that everyone can engage with.
Deep dive for this, and then Matt can have his say. Stirmaster, it stirs your coffee with ease. It includes various spoons, stainless coating. The retail price originally, it looks like it says 6,150. Then it's 6,100 at the all-droid price.
No, that's £pounds.
That's £pounds. All-droid price is 6,100, and the feature price is $70
Nice.
It's gone from 6,100 to $70
Still twice the price of a talkie toaster. Weren't they only £30?
What I quite like is that it says calls may be monitored for tabloid purposes.
Nice.
Would you buy a Stairmaster to save you 2 weeks so you could go skiing?
I've bought some dumb shit. Possibly not as Stairmaster, but something equally as fucking ludicrous. I'm trying to think what my most disgraceful purchase ever was. We're recording this in December. I currently have a candle advent calendar because I'm a twat. But I love my candle advent calendar. So, no, not really. I make some dumb purchases, but never dumb purchases that I don't like.
Fair enough. Matt, would you buy a Stairmaster?
I've got a soup maker. I like my soup maker. That's well good. It's basically a blender what heat shit, though.
Stairmasters are no air fryers, are they? So,
have you got an air fryer?
Yeah, I want one of them. Got one with 2 drawers.
So again, that intersperses. So during this, I mean,
you haven't said whether or not you would buy a Stairmaster, Kurt.
No, because I don't drink tea or coffee. So no.
I am retracting your British citizenship if you're not drinking tea.
That's fine.
I've just drunk a cup. Right, what is your most ludicrous kitchen appliance? I've got a bread maker and a soup maker.
I've got a Liverpool Football Club microwave.
Do you even support Liverpool?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's fine then.
So it's not as ludicrous as it sounds, but yes, I still have a liver bird emblazoned onto the top of the microwave.
I love that they have done a football branded microwave. There is literally nothing that football won't brand. Good. What's your most ludicrous one, Matt?
I've got a double-decker dish rack.
Smooth. That's nice. That I want one.
Gives me more real estate to dry my dishes because I was expanding onto the workstation.
I might get one of them. So I am very susceptible to dumb shit, it turns out. Who's surprised?
Should we get the phone? We get the phone. What did you make to the phone? Because it's not new. That's kind of like, that's going back a couple of decades, the phone that he uses with the aerial on and like kind of, you would have a home station for it and he kind of carries it around with him.
It's a visual gag. And that's important. And I think that's why they did it. But yeah, it looks like the cordless telephone that I used to argue with my brother over when, again, I was watching Red Dwarf as a teenager. So maybe it's a nod, or maybe it's just practical for the visual gagness of it all.
Purpose.
But yeah, it is clearly outdated.
I do like, I mean, even if it is a kind of a gag in that way, I do like the fact that they still kind of play around with like the CD, VHS aspect and go, actually, let's use some older tech in a universe 3 million miles ahead of us. I always like that kind of using nostalgic stuff in futuristic terms. And I think it works quite effectively. Let's talk about the all droid gag up in total then, because again, it's towards the end. It pays off with the making their own Stirmaster. But Matt, what do you make of this thread then? The fact it's my partner's one of her favourite moments is when Crichton has to get on the phone and talk to the droids, which is just absolutely comedy, like gold. The way he utilised that body is incredible. What do you make to this thread and this gag? Because this one's probably the weaker for me. I think there's moments it doesn't really land.
It's probably just to give Lister an actual a subplot to do, because it is very, very Rimmer heavy in terms of Rimmer psychology. It's actually quite a very important Rimmer episode when you think about it. Which considering we've just got to this point before we acknowledge that it's in fact perhaps one of the most important episodes of Rimmer's character arc. But then again, this is also another example of they seem to keep closing Rimmer's arc with the same ideas again. This is another version of that. But to balance it, I think they need to give Lister something to do. And they give him that Stirmaster type thing, which is probably not his best. It's probably not his most interesting arc that he's had, but I think I still feel like it's perfectly in character, because again, this is the first time that we've seen Lister in about 13 years, and he's probably gone stir crazy, pardon the pun. So,
well,
yeah. So he's well into middle age. So he's got to that point where the most mundane things might be slightly more interesting.
As I say, it's got two interesting things. So the Crichton thing works for me, but the one which feels like it needed another draft was the whole, like, God damn it, that whole scene where he's like, kind of, I'm going for the phone. It felt too much. Mm-hmm. It was too repetitive. It needed to have a draft on there, and I thought that was the thing. But overall, I thought the actual concept was good. I just don't think out of everything that we see, I don't think it's probably the strongest one. What do you make to it, Mark?
I think that's fair. I think I agree with you on that.
But then what it does do, though, is that it gives another kind of closing visual gag of combining them. So you've got the android or hologram crash face with the spinning beach balls of death with the simulant.
Yeah.
But then, so she's there with that constant expression, but then also being used as Stirmaster. So like karma wins out.
Two stories combined.
So again, so that kind of two visual gags are combining to each other together and stuff. And I think, and it kind of works because it means that things kind of overlap. So there is a payoff to it. There is a payoff to it,
yeah.
And all these kind of visual gags are all repeat each other. So I think it kind of adds to that.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I think I'm not denying that it's actually really important. I just it doesn't. There's moments where it works really well, and there's other moments where it doesn't. There is some, like, as I say, some aspects where it's like, would you like to complain about being put on hold so much? Yes, I would. Please hold. Which is just brilliant. It's just, what a brilliant line that is.
It sums it up as well, isn't it? It's just fun. And other people's frustration is funny. Your own frustration is not funny. Tell you what I was disappointed by.
Well,
Trojan was the name of the ship. I was never going to be able to predict that. Didn't I say something about condoms?
You being you, probably.
a Trojan horse and condoms.
Yeah, we did say stuff about Trojan horses, didn't we?
When we get onto Trojan, and before we do get onto Trojan, is we do see Starbug. Now, that's something that surprised you, Mark, because it's not in the credits.
Yeah, exactly that. I wonder why they didn't have any Starbug in the credits whatsoever. Just seems odd.
Potentially, it might not have been rendered yet, maybe.
Or maybe there was just no intention and they just didn't happen to use it and it's a coincidence.
But, so, I mean, do they have the Starbug cockpits in Series 10? I can't remember. Because they've got that new cockpit set for Red Dwarf, which is very Starbug-like. So
Yeah,
it's
it
not.
is, yeah.
So it's not exactly like that massive control room that was in Series 1. It's like it's like a red version of the slightly spacier version of Starbug stuff. So, do they really need that set at the moment? I mean,
I don't think it is. I think it's only in visuals, like getting from that to Trojan. I don't think there's anything that I can think of where it's done it again. Okay. So they start talking about the Space Infinity fleet and the fact that about Howard and stuff, because it all relates to the quantum rod. And there's a couple of like line gags in there where it's like winning gold with a chopstick, which is a great delivery from Kat, which is just incredible. And then there's a line that's like Lister goes like Rimmer goes, and we're probably saving the universe, and doing his little American voice, which was nice to hear.
deep continuity, whether it's deep or not. Rimmer sits on the captain's chair and like, there must be 40 buttons here. Because in Series 8, they swayed him with 5 buttons, and he was capitalising that. So he has a kind of thing for having buttons to press, and I quite like that. And again, another example of Series 10 fitting in quite a few.
And it I'd say like a soft reboot. It's like it is like 3. It feels like 3 in some ways. It's giving you information that you need to know about the characters, because they have been away for some time. But it's had a refresh in the imagery. Obviously, there's a lot of things that people need to get caught up on. And it does feel that way. And I think it works really effectively in that way. I mean, even like some of the, like we're saying with like some of the throwaway gags, like the heartburn one, it was good. It's like, must have a glowing foot in your heart. Yeah, it's called heartburn. Which is just like, just brilliant. Just to like sort of recapitalize that Rimmer thing of like sort of his disdain and obviously the resentment that will come in, which I think works really, really good.
A slight other thing, going back to callbacks that we've missed because we've been jumping around with the moose gag. Just before the Lister answers the moose thing, he goes like, "Will you put that phone away?" He goes, "No, it's everywhere with me. If Kachansky walks through that door now and wants sex, then this is going in my butt crack, man."
Which then leads me to our next thing, Mark, because Mark, we were surprised. I was surprised. I think Matt was surprised how much Chris Kachansky's mentioned through the entirety of X.
Yeah, I think as we was watching during our Zoom chat, me and Kurt just looked at each other, and Kurt was going, "That's 4 times." That's like counting with his hands the amount of times that Kachansky was referenced.
I wonder if they approached Chloe Annette and she said no. I suspect they didn't. From the impression I get from what I've seen, they wanted classic 3 to 6 style Red Dwarf.
And there's nothing opening for appearing in the odd episode or 2, I think, but not as a regular, perhaps.
I mean, I don't know if they do have any cameos, and I would suspect from the fact that Chloe Annette has retired, it would be Claire Grogan, and I wouldn't want that. I think Chloe Annette took the role and made it hers, and I think it would be a backward step. But I thought that about Holly going back to Norman Lovett as well. I'd love to see more of Hattie Hayridge's Holly, because I genuinely liked her more than Norman's Holly. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just going on taste there more than actual logic.
Another thing on the Trojan, what they have to do is they have to split them up, because there's like we've got the stories having to split up. So you've got Kat and Lister going off on their journey, because we've got to remember the Stirmaster, and Kat disappears. But just before he does, which is still gets me every single time, there's a lot in this episode which I just find hilarious, is when Rimmer glitches and then Kat just turns on and goes, "That was cool!
Yeah.
Do it again." Which is just absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect the way he delivers that line.
And it feels like they have slipped into their favourite clothes. You know, it feels like they're warm and comfy in their Oodie, and they just have got their characters effortlessly back with just real aplomb. And that's great, because that might not have happened. And I think same scene, Rimmer's glitch face is one of the best things in the entire world. Just the way he pulls his face, and then the way this is another continuous gag throughout the episode. Rimmer's glitch face, funny as fuck, looks utterly ridiculous. And then you see Rimmer's glitch face again. But what I wasn't expecting was Howard's glitch face and all the simulants' glitch face mimicking Chris Barry's glitch face. It was wonderful, and I howled. Just a face, someone pulling a face, being one of the best gags I've seen in a long time, is just Red Dwarf gold.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on the Trojan here as well, there's moments, as I say, there's moments right through this episode. I'm sure we'll clock onto most of them. But the one that's really interesting and stuck with me, I think it might be on 3 Million Years, Matt, I'm not entirely sure, but when Chris Barry is at the console and Howard Rimmer, because of the quantum rod, which I'll talk about in a second, but the quantum rod brings Howard Rimmer like in all over the airspace, and Rimmer takes the call, but I think the chair didn't work properly, so Chris Barry has to replicate him going down on a chair as if he's in a chair. Even like sort of bob back up again. So he does that entirety, that's like ducking down, and then has to bob up as if it's working. He doesn't want to meet them. He hasn't passed his ass on now, which again, linking into, Hey Ho, Pip and Dandy, that storyline is still ongoing. It is with Crichton, so it's a continuation. And not only that, and this does happen again. It's not really a spoiler to say this does happen again, but the way that Rimmer instructs Crichton to forget the last few seconds and then to say blah blah blah.
I forgot that this happened in this episode.
Are you thinking about the one that happens later?
Yeah. I forgot that this happens in that one. So yeah. So the fact that he does it, and Robert Llewellyn's face when he forgets where he is and then looks around and goes, "Whoa," and he just wanders off. Again, just like what Mark was saying, they just have fallen into the characters so succinctly and so naturally, and I just find that really fascinating, especially given this is 2012. In 2016, the X-Files will come back, and David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson really struggled in that to get their characters back. These four have just gone boop, and they're just back to normal. And I know it's less time has happened from 2009 to 2012 compared to 2009 to 2016, but at the same time, they just seem to have fallen directly into their nature. And then, of course, the quantum rod does come back in the later episode. The whole concept of it, because of the entanglement and the synchronicity that both Kat and Crichton experience. And I like the fact that they've utilised something from the first episode again in a later episode. And we talked about that in Series 6, that they did that for Series 6 on the Trail for Red Dwarf. So this has very kind of interesting allusions with 6 in that regard.
I think it probably makes more sense than 6, because they must have technically gone round in a circle for 6, because they fiddled with the order of the episodes. Yeah. I mean, I remember feeling very dirty that I had to criticise a moment of Gunman of Apocalypse.
Do you want to criticise it again, Mark, to feel even more dirty?
No.
He's gonna have to have a show. He's gonna have to have crying a show in there. So, I'm so sorry, Gunman. I didn't mean to.
Best episode. It's still the best episode so far for me, anyway. There isn't an episode in 10 that is better than Gunman for me.
Back to Reality is still better.
There isn't an episode in 10 that's better than Back to Reality either. That's my second favourite.
And speaking of that, on Smegazines, stop getting Back to Reality wrong.
What?
You were all getting characters mixed up and all kinds and back to reality when you were talking about the magazines. It
Oh,
was
we
like,
got there. We were fine.
It was my Alan Partridge moment when I was like, stop getting my favourite episode wrong.
We don't get it very wrong.
Shall we talk about
Star Trek outfits? They look great.
Well, not yet.
Oh.
The resentment drain. So we get Rimmer having that resentment drain, and then they go over to the ship because they realise that Howard Rimmer is on his way. And they have this conversation about, like, Lister does the big spiel, doesn't he, about the fact that, you know, you're really going to do this, you're going to do this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, and just show how much of a man you are. And then Rimmer just goes, I think we all know the answer to this.
Yep.
I want us to do the Star Trek outfits.
And that's a gag that you couldn't have got away with in early Red Dwarf. It's clearly a nod to how we understand the character, having learned about him. And that's important. It's not a reset. It's clearly not a reset. I still don't quite know what it is, because they should still be in prison. And according to the Christmas episode, they should be in prison for, oh no, they'd be out by now, just about, actually. Anyway, yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was clever. I thought it worked. And those Star Trek outfits are fucking great. And I think there's a fun nod to, once again, the kind of there's not a rivalry between Red Dwarf and Star Trek, but they kind of pretend that there is. And the whole Patrick Stewart thing, and those outfits look great.
They do.
They do.
Sim Crawford and Howard come aboard. One of my favourite moments in this episode, in the whole of Red Dwarf. But you were such a twat. It's just
You were an utter twat.
Like, so when honest to God, it was so difficult when he was on that Red Dwarf thing that me and Mark went to online that I was like, oh, you have no idea. You have no idea what's coming. You have absolutely no idea. It's just, his delivery is perfect. You, but you were such a twat. And just, I can't. Honestly, God, it's so funny. It's so funny.
I mean, the character is completely vile and unlikable, which is something that Rimmer was in the first few seasons. And I think that's a nice little nod as well, that whilst Rimmer has matured and developed to some extent because of his experiences on Red Dwarf, Howard hasn't. And they're all genetically twatty. And Rimmer's at least learned a little, you know, he's saved the ship and he's been brave. And whilst he can't pass his NAV exams, he's actually got a friendship group now. And Howard doesn't. And that's why he's so cruel and mean, like Rimmer was in the first few series.
But what I find interesting with this episode, and again, and this then comes back to my they keep closing Rimmer's arc theory. What this suggests to me is that the Rimmer family are actually a lot more like Arnold than what Arnold seems to think. So what you've got Howard Rimmer is basically Rimmer without Lister's influence. So so does that suggest that all of his brothers that he's looked up, envied, and just been full of resentment towards, are they the exact same as well? So would you we've only really heard of his brothers from Rimmer's, Arnold's perspective. So we're getting a glimpse here that, hang on, maybe what we perceive as his three brothers being like the best of the best, basically being Ace Rimmer, right, actually might not be true. And that's that somehow gives Rimmer some sort of comfort towards that. And this theme, and I'm not on the last episode of this series, but this theme kicks back. No.
I thought you were on 010. I thought Mark wasn't on the next few episodes. No. I thought it's been you doing the show now.
but this theme kicks back in again with Rimmer in, I can't remember the name of the last episode, but the last episode is another Rimmer focused one.
The end, isn't it? No, the beginning, sorry.
So the beginning.
Because it's the play on the end.
Yeah. The beginning kind of doubles back on themes on here, and again will close Rimmer's arc in the same way that Only the Good, this episode, and almost out of time kind of started alluding to. So this we're knee deep in them kind of repeating kind of things in with Rimmer, and no spoilers.
It's Rimmer's own Ouroboros.
Yes,
is what we're saying.
Yes,
is that what we're saying? It's Rimmer's own Ouroboros. It just keeps circulating around the same story.
And no spoilers, but
do you want me to close my ears?
No, you don't have to. But people who've watched Compromtland, we're getting a version of Rimmer without Lister. There's still some kind of there's a likable form of Howard that we have with Rimmer, because I think Rimmer's always had that self-loathing and that envious, whereas we can assume that Howard has never felt envious of he's probably never felt envious of Arnold because of the fact he honestly thought Arnold was shit. So, and was proven to be, which is what Rimmer was trying to do with the gap with the lateral thinking exercise, but was proven wrong.
I mean, we've got to give kudos to Mark Dexter, because he does such a good job. And, you know, as much as like we've talked about Titan, and, you know, not necessarily saying that someone like Mark Dexter would play it, but I could see something like that working. Like if you can get someone that good in a Red Dwarf universe, because we've not really seen someone like Howard Rimmer before. There's people that have been introduced, but there's not really been like the Howard Rimmer. And I'm not saying that obviously, you know, it would be a perfect match, but for me, if I stretch far enough, I can see a Titan version with different characters if you're going to do it that way. But the problem with Titan is it's going to be a prequel. But I could see Red Dwarf universe with different characters, and I think Howard Rimmer is a perfect example of that. Another perfect, beautiful gag and it's not even anything that's like, it's the way it's delivered again. It's the fact of Crichton Krajinski, and I said, and I messaged you both last night on this, where it's just like, you know, it's like, you know, oh well, you know, a mechanoid. Why aren't you going with something like Sim Crawford here? And he just goes, oh yes, he likes to work with the unfortunate. Blah, 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 blah. It says, no, we just hosed him down and gave him a hat.
And Crichton's face, you know, oh, kind of face. It's great. There's a lot of good face in this episode. So much face. I like face. I've enjoyed faces in this episode immensely.
And you rebuilt him. And again, but what's actually quite good with that, with Howard, actually tells you Crichton's story as well, because it says about you rebuilt him. He was on the Nova 5. Don't mention Nova 5, but, you know, that we found him, we rebuilt him, blah, blah, blah. All of that within that small sentence gives you Crichton's backstory. So that's what I mean by the reboots. It's good for that perspective.
I'm not sure we could even call it a soft reboot, but I think that's a little kind of moment to help. Yeah.
Just a refresh of who they are.
Yeah, a refresh rather than a reboot.
And then we get introduced to Hampton, who keeps forgetting. Hampton. And then David Listerton Smythe.
Just no reason for it, but it's funny.
And he's a touch T.
That is so Trek. That is such a piss take of Trek.
Yeah.
Such a piss take.
See, my mind went to and again, I've only ever seen the first season of it, so is Babylon 5 and the Telepaths.
Well, yeah, but Babylon 5 is better than Deep Space Nine and what Deep Space Nine should have been. So I'd retain So Trek.
I'm holding off on my comments.
I need to finish watching Babylon 5 because I really enjoyed it.
Babylon 5's great.
I really enjoyed that first season.
The effects, yeah.
I know, that's why I can't do it. That's why I don't like the effects. I don't like the look of it. I just can't do it.
Anyway, touch T's turn up.
Go on, touch him. Honest to God, it's just like it's just one thing after another with this scene. It's like literally like Crichton Krajinski, the heartburn stuff, the twat, the Hampton, the touch T. The criticism I have here is Crichton telling everyone in space of everyone saying, touch T, it's touch telepathy, sir. It's like, wouldn't Lister already know that? And are you not telling Howard and the Sim that something's afoot? And it is purely for the audience. And it does feel a bit off out of the entire scene. That's the thing I feel a little bit, always throws me out a little bit, but I know why they did it.
I hadn't thought about it, but I think you're right.
That's who goes, oh, we haven't got time for it. We've got plenty of time, bud. Yeah.
Go ahead, touch him.
Yeah.
I think maybe the touch T thing might be something you wouldn't have had on a mining ship, but you'd have had on a ship like Trojan. So maybe, he's a miner. So maybe he doesn't. No, I think something like a touch T is probably a thing that people know.
But just Lister working out that the best way to do it is to squash his head so hard you're feeling discomfort. You're thinking I'm pushing your head too hard. The way that Mark comes back at that and just goes, "Oh, that's amazing!" It's just like, oh, that is comedy timing perfection. It's just the way he reacts afterwards is brilliant,
and it's a nice little nod to how dumb Rimmer can be as well.
Yeah,
because it's his brother, and share genetics, and I liked it a lot. I did, and it was in this scene that I noticed that having spent his entire career as Lister complaining about the dreads, he's got even more dreads. He's got loads of dreads, and
he's about to get some more next episode.
True.
Oh, I want to see everything. So there's moments, as I say, the continuation of the all-droid station, and Crichton gets involved and does the whole thing in that. And then we kind of have the resentment that we find because Howard doesn't then realises that he has actually got resentment for Rimmer. We get a bit of Chris Barry within that scene later on as well, with the fact of about the cars, the vehicles, and I've got two, which kind of brings Chris Barry into it a little bit more. But I do like the glee that Rimmer has on Howard going, "Of me! You're jealous of me!"
Yeah.
Which is great. And obviously Sim Crawford disappears in the teleporter. And that's something that you did pick up on the trailer, actually, that you were saying there's a lot of teleportation in the show. And that tends to be a new kind of facet that happens quite a bit in the show now.
They are dressed like they're in Trek, though.
Yeah, dressed like they are in Trek. That's true.
Just before that Sim Crawford teleports, they say, "Oh, we'll catch you up and move the ship." And there's a bit where he goes, "I don't feel the ship moving." And there's that other kind of Star Trek kind of gag where they say, "Yeah, we're turning right," and everyone's like,
"Yeah, we're turning right now." And he points.
Good.
I don't feel it's turning.
So a tiny thing on this. Why was she Sim Crawford rather than Cindy Crawford?
Because that's too much of a gag.
They couldn't afford Cindy Crawford.
That's probably too much of a timely gag. They probably would have gotten away with it in series 1 or 2 if they did it that way, but not in 2012.
I would have preferred Cindy Crawford. She does a good resentment face later on there, so all is forgiven. Honestly, howled. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
When we get out of Howard Rimmer and the resentment train, they're on it's strange enough that obviously they have to bring everything over to the Trojan to actually do the resentment train. And we find out the history of Howard Rimmer. And then we also find Sim Crawford. But we also find that Kat's struggling to find his way around the ship as well.
So he's all I find funny is that he's now trying to navigate his way around the ship, even though he's pretending to be the navigation officer. During
that, as I say, the realization and obviously the whole thing about he's finding it, and when he does get shot and the Chris Barry aspect to it, this is where we can talk about Crichton.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've got a feeling, and again, I think it's the 3 million years bit where he talks about this, about the amount of water that Crichton's mask is held, and I think he actually pours it out at one point. I'm not sure if it is this scene or even this season, but he mentions it. But within this scene, you can totally see his eyelids are full of either water or something. It's just not, or it's melting or something.
By water, do you mean sweat?
Horrific. Yeah. Water, sweat, something. Because when you look at the scene itself, you can see Robert Llewellyn kind of pushing his head back a little bit and just trying to see through his eyes. And the whole of his eyelids, or where his eyelids should be, look like it's something's really badly affecting him, and I don't know if it's a rash or sweat or something. So that's why I wanted to wait to this point, because it's kind of off-putting, because it's not too bad up until that point. And I know, Mike, you've got some interesting discussion to have on Crichton's new mask, but on that particular one, is the one that jumps out at me every time. It's like, oh, it doesn't look great. And I know they had to probably do it because of cost reasons, but
Yeah.
it needed to be done again, that really.
And again, credit to Robert Llewellyn for sticking through it. He has the hardest time. And you're right, it does affect it, but it's still funny. It's still a great scene. And they do make a good job of kind of like almost fast tracking a Rimmer-like sympathy for Howard, because by revealing more of his backstory, it does become more tragic, like Rimmer's is, and I ended up feeling quite sorry for Howard. So good job on that.
Matt.
Yeah.
Crichton's mask.
I'm not a fan of it.
Why? Why are you not a fan of the mask?
It's the nose.
Okay.
I think there's just the nose seems a bit too pointy, and the chin, as opposed to previous ones. I mean, 4, 5, and 6 are probably the most consistent it's ever been. 7, I think the mask in 7, I think looks really, really good with all the high like contours and stuff. And I think 9, Back to Earth, I think is very similar to 8, which is just like a smoothed out version of the 7 mask. But I think we're now at the point of the show, and not spoilers, but yeah, the Crichton mask never looks the same as it ever did again. I think it looks a lot better because I think the round it out. I think the round it out, it looks a lot more comfortable in 11 and 12. But yeah, there's just something about it which just looks too harsh, too angular, and the nose just doesn't look. There's just something about it. If this looks like what would happen if they met another Series 4000 droid, you'd immediately tell it's a different droid. If you said it wasn't Crichton, that's how much it's very kind of uncanny valley for me.
Okay, yeah. Well, I can see that. I can totally see why you'd think that. As I say, I think majority of the time it didn't really bother me, but I think that one particular scene did.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I guess I'm happy that we've got low budget Red Dwarf. Unfortunate for Robert Llewellyn's comfort, but yeah, it didn't particularly bother me.
The final scene is they all back in the bunk. A letter comes in. And I think this is a little bit chef's exam for me. This is kind of like, it doesn't really kick on after this episode, so it's not really followed up on. But it feels like it's them playing a joke on Rimmer, like in my head canon, because they're saying about like the Red Dwarf is now going to be called the SS Rimmer. And, well, that's the highest thing of what, et cetera, and then Rimmer gets resented. It does feel like a little bit like that, Mr. Lister, sir, it feels a little bit like that, and it doesn't really continue on in any form. But I'm quite happy with that. I don't know what you think about the end scene there.
I think it's just a wind-up, like you say. It's like, yes, Mr. Lister, sir, and I think it works because it's funny, and we get to see face one more time. Good face. I like the face. Yeah, it's a Red Dwarfy way to end an episode. I think they went quite safe with how dwarfy they made it. It really feels like a comfortable coat. It feels like whilst they've done a great job, they've not taken any risks on this episode. And I can completely understand why, and it works. And I'm so happy it's good.
Yeah, same. I'd say more or less same. I think it is a kind of a piss take. There's a certain point where I think it wasn't, where it's saying like, oh, we're now going to award Howard a retroactive officer ship or something, which I think kind of helps the kind of almost soft reset the episode so that the kind of stop Rimmer's character arc from getting too kind of recovered or something. So I think it kind of helps build that resentment back a bit. So up to that point, it's like, oh yeah, so it's not, and I believe that bit, but then the SS Howard Rimmer, I think, is definitely a piss take. It's like they're all kind of waiting for him to kind of snap.
Yeah.
And I think it's a kind of good visual callback gag to end the episode on.
Great. I think I did remember something that we haven't talked about briefly, and it's gone again, which is great, isn't it? That's always it's great when that happens. But there is something that we didn't. Actually drawing on Rimmer's face.
Yes.
That we didn't do. That was the one thing that we didn't pick up on. And I think that again kind of downplays the Rimmer ness of it. It's like it's a, and then Lister's very kind of reluctant to actually do it to begin with. He's like, no, we can't do this, and then he just gets involved into the fun. So I think there's that. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else. Shall we move on to next week where we were talking about fathers and sons? SUNS.
I'm just briefly skimming through. So I'm just quickly skimming through the tongue-tied fandom wiki, and there's some background information on this, where apparently in Dimension Jump 2011, there was comments by Doug Naylor suggesting that he wanted Series 10 to focus on the characters' family backgrounds. One idea that seemed to be hinted at was that an incarnation of Frank Rimmer would show up. In the end, this manifested in the inclusion of Howard Rimmer. This episode was also dedicated to the memory of Joe Howard.
Joe Howard, yeah. I was going to say that, yeah.
Which was one of the production manager for Series 7 and line producer for Series 8 and producer for Back to Earth. I think she died shortly before the filming began.
Good to reference. It's sad when things like that happen. That's it, guys. Red Dwarf 10 is underway. Next week, as I say, we're talking about fathers and sons. Where can people find you online, Mark?
If you're looking for me personally, it's at Mark Adams HC on Twitter and Instagram. I have another podcast. It's about Chucky and Child's Play. It's a bit niche, but so is this. That's at Chucky Vision on Twitter. And yeah, I'm a celebrant. If you want a celebrant, I'm good at that. Drop me a message.
Excellent. Matt, where can people find you?
Go to Linktree/Matt Latham and all my stuff's on there. I'm not going to go through all the handles and stuff, but you can follow my music podcast, Pick a Disc, talk about music. There's Ask Us About Loom, which talks about video games, point-and-click adventure games, including like a crossover special that happened with this podcast about Simon Sorcerer. Follow that, and as well as a whole bunch of stuff on Win. So Linktree/Matt Latham.
Excellent. You can find me on Linktree as well, /Muldrake. And the one I'd like to push at the moment is the new, new Red Dwarf podcast that I've started.
This is not new. This is well old now.
The new Lost podcast that I am doing called the Magic Box Pod. And you can find that on Linktree, the Magic Box Pod. And all socials are the Magic Box Pod. So that's the best place to find me. So until next time, thank you all for joining us and for jumping on the journey of the Dave series of Red Dwarf 10. And until next week,
it's a moose.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This Podcast network.